topic of the last panel, which is called or entitled From Races to the End User, a constantly developing pathway. So here we're going to see how manufacturers and the motorsports competition and others in the energy companies and other automotive-related industries are using these competitions not only as an advertising showcase, but also as a major test bench for technologies and products, such as Formula E, national motorcycle rallies and races, the European lorry race competition. These are the ones that are really putting these technologies to the test in their competitions using renewable technologies. So to set the stage for the organizations and the promoters and sponsors of these events, I have the pleasure to call up to the podium the Vice President of the World of Automobile Sports Competitions, Mr. Avignon. I also would like to call Jorge Villegas, who is the President of the International Federation of Motorcyclists, Mr. Carmelo Espeleta, who is the CEO for Dorna Sports, Alberto Longo, who is Formula E co-founder, and finally, Mr. Patrice Ratti, who has just been up on the last panel, but is now going to be the moderator of this last session of the day. So, Patrice, if you would like to make a brief introduction of the panel speakers, it's all yours. Go right ahead.
Ok, buenas tardes de nuevo. Me estoy cambiando el gorro. Es realmente un honor de moderar.
It's an honor to moderate this panel with the highest authorities in the motorsport in the world, Mr. Villegas, President of the International Federation of Motorbikes, that supervises all the activities of the motorbike sports in the world, Mr. Manuel Albinho, Vice President of the FIA and President of the Spanish Federation, Mr. Carmelo Espeleta, CEO of Dorna Sports, organizer of the very famous GP Motorbike World Championship, and Alberto Longo, co-founder of Formula E and innovator of the winner of the electric vehicles motor contest, a race. And I will give a brief introduction, and then we'll have a small discussion. We don't have many formal presentations. We have two organizers of high-profile world competitions. It's a good representation of the diversity of mechanical sports to help us understand the role and the research and test of new technologies, which is today's approach. The races were born as soon as motorcycles and automobiles were invented. And for the manufacturers, they were, and they still are, a way to show their performance and reliability and a way to test innovations. They have been serving that purpose ever since, in which the global warming has become one of the greatest concern, and we're going to discuss the importance of these races given the global warming context. But before we start, it is important for the audience to understand your sport and the high diversity and the roles of the federations and the organizers. And probably this is something that is not very clear for the vast majority of people. Mr. Avignon, can you give us a general vision or opinion on the motorsport and explain what is the role of the FIA, Fédération Internationale Automobile? Yeah, very good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much. First of all, let me excuse that the president of FIA could not come after Abu Dhabi GP. He fell ill and he couldn't attend this meeting. The International Federation role is legislate, regulate, and define the future of the automobile strategy with the main stakeholders of the sport, the vehicle manufacturers, the tires manufacturers, the fuel manufacturers. We get together with them, and from these meetings and these think tanks, we design the future strategy for the development of the races that are the real lab for testing the cars for the brands and for the future. And this is the most important role that we have as one of the stakeholders in this transition towards a new model of mobility. This is the same question for motorbikes. Before I answer, I want to excuse my poor Spanish, but I would like to show you a small video film, short video film.
Bueno, yo creo que
I think that was a wonderful video film that shows also the diversity. We have 30 captains, 30 pilots from all over the world, many women competing in our races and competitions, but above all, we've been able to see that we have a logo, which is the FIM, the FIM green, because we started. I will answer your question afterwards, but let me, because we started as International Federation of Motorbike 20 years ago. We started with the Sustainability Commission. Now it is called the Environment Commission, and we started to really become concerned about all these issues because the motorbike sport has a problem of its bad image because it has risks, because we have to work a lot more than many other sports in order to be well understood. And this is why we have started to work to keep the circuits clean, to try to reduce the noise, and of course, we will talk about that later, to have this fair and just transition, energy transition that we are all on the path to. And this is why the video I showed you is a showcase of all this diversity. I agree with you that we don't have a one-size-fits-all. We need to work on several fields of activity to ensure that this is a fair, good transition. But then going back to your question, the FIM, FIM, and I think FIA too, we have three basic pillars. One is sports, and that's absolutely, and sports generate champions like you. He points at somebody in the room, and then tourism. You've seen that tourism is being developed enormously. People love to ride their bikes and go to places and know places that otherwise they won't go there. And the third pillar is mobility. We have a representative in Brussels, another one in New York, in order to work with international bodies as in everything regarding the regulations and that have an impact on the life of a motorbike pilot or rider. And I believe that the work of the international federations is much more important than what we just see when we see the races, because on the one hand, you can regulate sports and penalize bad behaviors in the circuit, but of course, FIM and FIA, we have a lot of work that is not visible in the backstage, and we do a great deal of things. Mr. Espeleta, Dorna organizes this championship of MotoGP since 1991. What can you tell us about the last competition this year and your role as an organizer of the MotoGP? Thank you very much. Good afternoon. We have an agreement with the FIM since 1991. We started organizing in 1992. And this is an agreement to manage the World Championship, which is the FIM is the owner of the championships, but in agreement with them, we organize the championships, and Dorna has an agreement that, in which the regulations are absolutely respected. These regulations are never changed unless both parties agree on that, and since 1992 we've always had meetings, and we never had any disagreement on anything that we had to change. The sport has changed a lot since 1992, and even before, as the president of the FIM has just shared with us, even before the environmental transition was there, we already did that. And the MotoGP, we had much more polluting motorbikes with a mix of oil and gas and petrol in the motorbike engine. And ever since, the championships has been part of the research that the industry carries out, and I think that the best way to research on the things that will be in the hands of the common consumer in the streets is through the competitions, because the competitions push the technology to the limits. In the beginning, we had a 500cc motorbikes that had some 50 liters per race, and now it's only 20, and we will reduce the consumption of fuel with better performances than before, at same as Moto2 and all other levels of our competition. Our work together with the FIM has always been to be at the service of the industry and at the service of the motorsport, at the service of improving the motorbikes, because from our point of view, is a great tool for mobility and for freedom. And with the different technologies at hand available, we need to keep this world of motorbikes, because it's a world of freedom. Do you want to show a video too? Yes, you have also a video there.
The moment we've all been waiting for has finally arrived. Lights out and lift off for MotoGP in 2022 in Qatar. Friendly fire, can't believe it. What an emotional victory for Enea Bastianini.
Who will be the rainmaster?
Miguel Oliveira snaps up the inside, but Miguel is the man in Mandalika. Today is your day. It's time to tango in Argentina. Aleix Espargo and Aprilia celebrate their first ever win in MotoGP. The 500th Grand Prix.
Here he goes.
All hail the new King of Kota.
Your leader of the championship.
Lightning start for Tranmere. Oh! Miller on the front end. But here comes Fabio Quartararo. It has been picture perfect for the reigning world champion. Fans back at the Circuito de Jerez. At the moment, it's a two-horse race between Pecco Bagnaia and Fabio Quartararo. Here comes Alex Espargaro. Brilliant, Bagnaia. He reigns in Spain. Alex Espargaro does take a stunning podium.
He goes straight past his teammate, Luca Marini into the lead.
This is another stunning ride by the reigning world champion. Pecco Bagnaia, he is the master of Magello. For the Battle of Barcelona.
Oh, contact!
Quartararo's been won. Alex Rins of Pecco Bagnaia, has been taken out. Oh my goodness, can you believe it? He thought the race was over. Fabio Quartararo conquers the Catalan Grand Prix. Round 10 here at the Saxon Ring. Quartararo will sweep up the inside of Bagnaia then in P1. Pecco Bagnaia's gone down. Quartararo wins the German Grand Prix.
Quartararo now attacks.
Oh, he's down! Oh no, Fabio Quartararo's gone down! What a move this is. Big race for Alex Espargaro. Our Dutch TT winner in 2022 is Pecco Bagnaia. Oh, how close was that? 300th of a second between Pecco Bagnaia and now Bastiani at the finish line. Pecco Bagnaia, the first Ducati rider in history to win 4 races on the spin. The king is back. And lights out, away we go here in Motorland now. He's gone down! Fabio Quartararo has been collected mid-pack. Is it going to be Bastianini or Bagnaia? It's the beast that wins a classic on the last lap again. Oh, Alex Espargaro, what is happening here? We've lost the man third at the end of the warm-up lap. Miller's gone for it on the inside. Jack Miller's been superb. Oh no! Pecco Bagnaia's cracked! Miller magic in Mategi. Whose destination is the top of the podium here in Bahrain?
4 races remained in the chase for the title.
Quartararo started 4th, he came through sector 2, 17th. Rain masterclass from Miguel Oliveira. Pecco Bagnaia does take a super important 3rd place. Second for Miller.
I'm still alive, mathematical, I'm a dreamer.
What a great stop. Quartararo, he's made a big mistake. Unfortunately, Jack Miller's world title hopes are ended. Rins wins in Australia. Awesome job by Marc Marquez. His 100th MotoGP podium. Pecco Bagnaia take over the lead of the MotoGP World Championship. Pecco Bagnaia up into 2nd place. Fabio Quartararo clinging on to that 3rd place. How close was that? Bagnaia is your winner here in Sepang. It's all down to the final Grand Prix. The long wait is over. Bagnaia and Ducati are MotoGP World Champion.
Magnífico, gracias. Señor Longo, ¿puede...
Mr. Longo, could you tell us why and how the Formula E was created 9 years ago, and what is it today, how it has evolved with time? Good afternoon to you all. My name is Alberto Longo. I'm a Formula E co-founder. I am from Sevilla, so coming to my hometown is such a great honor and such a pride for me. I want to be sorry. It's been I've been 10 years without any public presentation in Spanish, so I might have some mistakes in my Spanish. I didn't bring any wonderful video with me. I could have done it myself. I didn't even think of the possibility. How did we decided to create Formula E when the 2 founders, the 2 partners, Alejandro and myself, were very much involved with the motorsports? We had a team in the GP3, in GP2, in Formula 1 with Fernando Alonso and several other sponsorships that we had, and even we also had the TV broadcasting rights for Spain as well. So we saw that several sponsors that somehow we wanted to bring to our world of motorsports, they said they were against that because they maybe had more of a sustainable and eco-friendly image to sustain. And that made us reflect on the possibility to organize a a championship with only electric vehicles, and that could be an alternative to the existing sports that, in the case of the cars, is the Formula One World Championships. And I was thinking of something that could find its way and in coexistence with the current races and championships. And it was a way to help these sponsors to find a eco-friendly way of investing and sponsoring sports. So we started conversations with the International Federation of Automobile, the FIA, who was our partner from the very beginning, and we thought that this had to be a FIA championships in order to be credible and to have the different manufacturers that are now part of the endeavor. And so we went to the FIA created this championship, and they gave us a management license that we could get the commercial rights of this championship. And to your first question, what is the relationship between the federation and the promoters of this? The federation is the boss. That's it, and there is nothing else. The federation is the one who decides on the sport and technical aspects of the championships, and what we do is trying to sell what the FIA has there for us to sell. Let me say it this way. The relationship was very good from the very onset, and we are very proud of this wonderful relationship. We've created several working parties, technical, sports, and commercial working teams, and we have a higher Formula E committee that is the final decision maker, but in the end it is the World Council of the FIA that takes place every 3 months, is where the final decision is made and the green lights are given. So we have a brotherhood relationship with the FIA. This gives us an idea of the diversity of your activities and who does what in the world motorsport. You are all actors in the transition towards a more sustainable mobility. Let us now talk about the contribution of your sports in recent years. Mr. Avignon, a few years ago, 9 years ago, the FIA decided to create the Formula E Championship. What is your opinion on the impact of your decisions on the manufacturing of cars? Alberto, we are not the boss. We are really partners, and everything. The promoters are a very important part for the FIA, because it is with them that we develop the future of each championships, and they have to develop the commercial and the sports part. But the owner of the brand is the World Council of the FIA. But at the end of the day, there are no bosses here. The future is in the cooperation between all of us. I am not the boss in any case. The boss, unfortunately, couldn't make it to Sevilla today. But what we have contributed from the FIA in this particular case since 2014. In 2014, we introduced in the Formula One the first hybrid engines with the help of an electric battery, and this has shown a credibility, a performance of 30% in fuel consumption reduction. So that was a very positive. During the pandemic, we worked a lot on, we became the first world organization to create a first lot of 1,000 liters of biofuel. With the cooperation of the Formula One organizers, we could develop and test, so that part of that future that is in a near future, which is finding new energy sources, it is important to see that one thing is the propulsion and another thing is the energy. I think we can really go in depth on this thing. But we were fully aware a few years ago already that we needed to change that trend. And that is why in 2014 we introduced these new technologies in the Formula One Championship, and something that has helped a lot in this transition period, transition times, and to develop the competition as a testing lab with new outcomes that we expect for new fuels, new electric cells, and that Formula E and its success that has helped a lot as, again, a test lab to develop the electric part of the vehicles. And the best way to see that that was helpful is that these technologies developed in the championship are now being used by the cars that you see in the streets of our cities, and that many electric vehicles are using these features, technology that was first developed a few years ago in the Formula E championships and Formula One. We have also worked on aerodynamics and the weight of the vehicles. As you said before, these are both factors that are basic for the performance of the vehicle, and many of the composites of the new fibers that were used in the past for the competition are now used in high level cars, and thanks to these high-range cars, and the automotive industry is now using all this thanks to the tests that were carried out at the different races. So competition is a key element in the development of this challenge, that is, create new, better materials, less pollutant materials, and that the FIA has contributed to this evolution of the technologies thanks to its different championships. If you allow me, I would like to add something. And I think it is important to say that 10 years ago, 120,000 cars, electric cars, were sold, only electric cars. But today, this is more or less the level of monthly production. And only last year, the sales of only electric cars were duplicated regarding the previous year. So does that mean that Formula E is really fostering this growth? Not directly, but I would like to think that we are somehow responsible for this growth of electric vehicles sales. You think that the mentality of the people regarding electric vehicles has changed thanks to you? I think that it is not only the technology development, but also the awareness of the people about the benefits that an electric vehicle has for the user. But I think that thanks to the Formula E races, we have shown the performance of the technology breakthroughs, and there were some barriers. The industry could not penetrate the market, the consumer market, regarding the electric vehicles because of the battery, very ugly cars, the cars that are not fast enough. And you remember the Renault Zoe that was designed, and it was, what, 25 kilometers autonomy only. So. And it was you who designed it, right? And only 10 years ago, President Calderon was referring to that earlier before, that now batteries are much more performant. And it is very important to create this platform that shows, it's a showcase, for the people to realize that there is a real performance on these kind of vehicles. And it is working well up to the point in which let me give you a couple of examples what's going on in Formula E. And the battery of a car like the I-Pace from Jaguar has now increased 10% performance thanks to developments that were implemented in the Formula E. The autonomy of the battery for the Nissan Leaf, another hybrid, one of the most sold hybrid cars, has increased 181% thanks to the breakthroughs on the Formula E races. Mercedes has a new software of energy management embedded in their vehicles, and this energy management software, so that the new Mercedes can go from Frankfurt to London, which is 1,200 kilometers with just one electric load. That was unthinkable of a few years ago. And as the president of Mexico said, technology has really allowed for this transformation to exist.
So today's users, that's what Alberto was talking about, the consumers, the users, they want cars that have been partially developed and improved upon by Formula One or by a high-level competition. And Mr. Villegas and Mr. Espeleta, and for motorcycles, do you think there has been significant technology transfer from the world of motorcycling? Well, undoubtedly, we have a hybrid competition, we have a fully electric competition, and then we have the other classes of competition with the gasoline-fueled motorcycles. So, as my colleague said, this is a huge challenge for us. And from the Motorcycling Federation, we are looking at each and every solution possible, not just one solution, because the world is vast. And I think Europeans should carry out an exercise in opening up their vision to the rest of the world and not be so centered upon themselves. Because I was recently in Indonesia, where there are 90 million motorcycles. And in Thailand and Malaysia, there are similar numbers. And when we go to India, there will be many more motorcycles to see. So this is probably one of the most important lessons that we could learn, that the freedom of choosing your vehicle, and something that we've seen in Europe more recently after the introduction of the Vespa and then the 600, in many parts of the world, in Asia, Africa, and South America, their mode of transport is primarily motorcycles in 200 cc's. And just 50 cc's. And of course, we're going to be looking at these lower powered motorcycles. And we're going to be looking at hybrid and electrical motorcycles. And we've been improving both sides of the coin. We've been looking at both sides of the coin, not just the high-performing motorcycles, but the 50 cc's that we're seeing in developing countries. And in the coming years, we want them both to be more sustainable. And we're hoping that they can be totally emission-free by 2027. And we hope that through many of the test labs that we have been working with the Federation and the manufacturers, the fuel manufacturers, we hope to come up with a fuel that will have zero carbon emissions. That is our goal, to work on both lines, that is, coming up with zero impact fuels as well as working ever more on e-motorcycle competitions so that we can accommodate all of the realities of the world. When we talk about MotoGP, are they going to be using biofuel? Well, they use a blend of biosynthetic and with zero carbon impact. That's what we're working on. Yes, absolutely. It's been approved by the FIM. And we've been working with the manufacturers, which is what we've always done. From the very beginning to the end, we've been adapting it to the cylinder capacities, to the kinds of motorcycles, and we've been adapting them by the FIM to these different kinds of motorcycles with the associations of manufacturers and with the suppliers of gasoline to those manufacturers so that they can reach a consensus, which I think they're very close to doing, so that they can see, instead of being imposed upon by the FIA, by 2027, they'll be ready to do this without having any regulations imposed on them. I'd like to add one further idea to the debate, to the discussion. I don't think we should call them biofuels, because environmentalists are going to say that we are burning food. We call them eco-fuels. That's the best way to call them. Don't call them biofuels, because bio is something completely different. Eco-fuels are not going to have any or very little emissions. It's a mixture with bio and synthetic. It's an eco-fuel. Because you might think this is very frivolous now, but I think in the future it's going to be very important to specify this in the world of motorcycles, that motorcycles are going to be using some biofuels such as methanol, and that is just a curious fact, an interesting fact. But what I've seen in all of the European and Japanese developers is that, as my colleague said, the smaller cylinder motorcycles for moving about the city are electric motorcycles. China is manufacturing millions of these. China is the home to the largest city in the world, and they provide their citizens with 5 million motorcycles a year. These are electric motorcycles. So just to give you an idea of the scale of economy there. But I think we need to realize that usages of motorcycles are different, and there shouldn't be any stereotypes, but there should be solutions for each type of mobility. And just as we heard earlier from some of the earlier panel speakers, there are enormous possibilities in green fuels and renewables and in clean energies. But there's really a lot of interest, for example, in green energy. And we have to make sure that we take into account the cost of producing some of these energies. But I think we're moving in the right direction. Not everything is black and white. We need to make sure that we look at all of the shades of gray. We need to look at the price, the cost effectiveness of many of these fuels. And for motorcycles, it's a little bit more difficult to do because you have to have a larger tank. And we can't have a larger tank on a motorcycle to store fuel. So in e-fuel, the motorcycle weighs around 300 kilos. The energy one, it's a huge motorcycle. It weighs so much that the pilots can't even lift it up once they've fallen off of it. And so that is not the way to go, because we are not large-scale consumers of fuel, of gasoline, but we are the stage setters, so to speak. We are the models to follow. So that's why it is so important for the motorcycle world to provide feasible solutions, solutions with an S, not one single solution, but rather many different solutions. And the overriding idea is that fuels should be sustainable, or these eco-fuels, as I like to call them. And the manufacturers will also offer these eco-fuels for their motorcycles that are driven by civilians, by amateurs on the road. Yes, there are eco-fuels out there. They're in the experimental phase, but we are not at the industrial production stage. But that's not going to be long in coming. As I was just saying a few moments ago, it all depends on the fact that we can demonstrate that those eco-fuels are very, very positive, and everybody's watching us. The eyes of the world are on us at competitions, and if those eco-fuels perform at competitions, then they're going to be accepted by the everyday user. So, as I said, if we are competitive and if we are successful in the use of these fuels, the consumers are going to want to buy it. So yeah, it's a way of selling the product. And with you in the FIA, yes, at the FIA we are fully committed to zero carbon emissions by 2030, so much so that we just approved the vehicles that are going to be competing from 2026, and these are the new engines that are going to be using the electrical circuit. So about 50% of their propulsion is going to be electrical, and the rest is going to be fuel propelled. But after 2026, we want all of the world championships that are sponsored by FIA be dependent upon eco-fuels. And so with this, we have that commitment firmly in place. But at the same time, we also are going to have the Dakar Rally, and this is a long-distance competition that has a very, very long duration, and several teams are going to be using e-fuels. And so, as I said, we are fully convinced and trust that these e-fuels are going to be the preferred choice of fuel for the future, and not only for us, but for the entire world. And we're very demanding with our competitors. And so we also have initiatives in place in which we're not only trying to avoid any kind of pollution throughout the competition, not only by the competitors, by the spectators themselves. And so that's so important for the members of our clubs to be convinced of the utility of using e-fuels, and the sustainability factor has to be one that they keep at the forefront of their priorities. And precisely, competition is one of the least polluting elements, but rather the subscribers, the fans, and the visitors to these events also have to be committed to those same objectives. And so in the more practical sense, in the medium term, we want to be fully involved in the decarbonization, both within the world of competition as in without. So for 2026, all of the vehicles will be using, as you said, e-fuels, clean fuels. Well, Carmelo already explained this very, very succinctly. There is a lot of development yet to be made in this regard. What I've wanted to do is to sort of separate the electrical part, which has been demonstrated to be very efficient, and it's very efficient, much more efficient than the thermal engine solution, but we have to combine the two, and what kind of energy is going to provide fuel to that electrical part. And we need to see what kind of solution is come up with in the future. We're going to be looking at hydrogen. We're going to be looking at we're going to have to look at the color of that hydrogen, whether it's gray, purple, or green. So we need to look at this not only in the Formula One, but in all of the competitions by 2026 has to be highly dependent on sustainable fuels, no matter where they're sourced or You've also talked about the theory of the batteries, and how could the Formula One competition help drive this technology forward? Well, I think we're already doing it in a very natural way. We've seen how convenient it is to find efficiencies. We're talking about smaller volumes, lighter weights. We're looking at many of the different technologies behind greater efficiencies, and we've seen that this makes a vehicle more autonomous, covering longer distances. President Calderon has talked about the efficiencies of batteries as well, and we've seen that volume and weight are key factors here. And now in Mexico, we're going to be working with even lighter batteries in January. We're going to be carrying out testing field demonstrations in the field and on the raceway. And I think we're going to find in these batteries a major ally. And I think increasingly we're going to see how they become more efficient, and we're going to be using fewer and fewer of those rare earth minerals that were used or that are being used now, and even lesser so than 7 or 8 years ago. And I think the future is in that direction, that through technology and efficiency savings measures, we're going to be able to come up with new systems that are going to be discovered, and they're going to be tested, and I think they're going to be proven ways to become part and parcel of the new mobility model. And these eco-fuels are going to be part of that, alongside batteries and hydrogen and all kinds of energy that propels an electric motor. We're going to see that there's going to be all kinds of solutions that come up, and we want to continue to be a platform for making this visible. The visibility is important to the stakeholders, and in one way or another, we can have an influence on how successful and how widely accepted these are. We only have 5 minutes left. I've been told that we need to be starting to wrap the session up. I would have liked to have been here for hours, but I would like to give each of you the last opportunity to just for 1 or 2 minutes to wrap up with a takeaway message and how you see the world of motorsports and sustainability and mobility being tied together for the future. Well, if you don't have a statement, we could open the floor for Q&A. That's another possibility. There is a question from the floor, I believe. I need a microphone to hear it. Sorry. We couldn't hear your question, so I'm going to make that easier for you. I didn't know there was a Q&A session on this on the session, but I'm going to make the most of the opportunity. And it just dawned on me to ask. When I was on the phone with Carmelo, we were talking about some of these subjects, and we were talking about a project that we were involved in with RACE, the Rail Automobile Club of Spain, and we were talking about setting yourself apart, being different. And how do you do that? How can you guarantee that, for example, the motorcycle, MotoGP and Formula One and other championships in Spain and in Portugal, and since you do represent the entire world of motorsports, how can you consolidate your position while also being that differentiating factor? So one of those, I think, is pollution or lowering pollution levels. And maybe you want to finish what I've started. And he said, the World Championship is unique. It's irreparable. If I don't have some kind of low emission fuel, there's not going to be a world championship. So I have the feeling that there's going to be a world championship because they know that low emission or zero emission fuel is going to become a reality. And so I'm perhaps becoming the devil's advocate by putting this out on the table. Well, yes, you've hit it on the nail, because we've been working with the FIM, with the World Championship, the World Motorcycle Championship, from the very outset. And this has been the vehicle that the industry has used for most of the improvements that have been made in terms of motorcycles that are on the road and that our consumers are using. And that's exactly the case. As we work hand in hand, side by side with their technicians, with the manufacturers, which is what we've always done. We've always been very, very closely in touch with the manufacturers so that we can use what the industry has, the state of the art of the industry can be used by our motorcycles, and it's increasingly becoming electrified, and it's also going to be the eco-fuels used by motorcycles, so that people that have motorcycles are going to want to use these technologies. Thank you. Mr. Avignon, is there anything you'd like to add? I would just say that I think we need to make people realize how important competitions are in contributing to the objectives that we have ahead of us. And perhaps the best field test there is for developing new technologies and the challenges that we have are precisely in the world of competition, of motorsports. And we don't believe that energy is or electricity is the only source of energy supply, and we can see in all of the championships around the world that we have a huge diversity of options that we can use, from hydrogen, ranging from electrical energy, from all kinds of different fuels. So I think it's a good idea for us to take that message with us. That's the takeaway message today, is that there are all kinds of options out there, and I think the technologies that are being developed are very promising for a more sustainable future in mobility. I would simply like to congratulate the organizers of this event. This forum I think, is the beginning of a tradition. And the good thing is that we are putting these questions on the table and that we are discussing them openly, and we're trying to find the very best solutions to those. And I would also like to also express very publicly my gratitude for being invited to participate in this panel, and I also want to say that we are going to continue working very earnestly on all of these systems, and we're going to be working on all of these different topics with the FIA. We have two dear friends and colleagues at the FIA. It hasn't always been the case, but now it is, and we are very happy to say that we're working on women's issues, on health, on safety, and many, many other issues. And we're very pleased to say that we're going to be talking about women in sports in London very shortly. So we have so many things in common, and we have a championship that we sponsor together, which is the Harrods, and then we have the Dakar rally, and nothing's easy, but we like big challenges. So just to end with, many heartfelt thanks and congratulations on today's forum. I would like to give the floor to the last question, and it's not only to the panel but to the audience. I want to congratulate the Royal Automobile Club of Spain for accomplishing something that we were not able to accomplish at the United Nations. We are always politically correct in the United States, and you have managed to break that rule, and you have been able to be representatives of the UN and be here in this event, in this forum. And if you ask me what can change public opinion, I think this is one of the most pressing issues of the day, is this one. That is the way that we can change public opinions, viewpoint and mindset. And if you ask me how we're going to do that, I think we're looking at the solution right now. And that is that connection that exists between sports and the automobile industry. The world of sport and the passion for new generations for sport, and sports and the public opinion about who is the contaminator, who is the polluter, who is the emissions producer, and that's what going to be the debate of the very near future. And I think through sport we're going to be able to solve many of those issues. I don't think we could have any better conclusion to the day, so I would just like to end by thanking all four of these panel speakers for their participation, and we'll see you this evening. Thank you.